Hello and welcome to the 115 Fouls FPL podcast, the newest fantasy football podcast that brings you all the stats, advice and laughs each week in FPL. I'm Steve.
I'm Jonny.
And today we'll be looking ahead to Gameweek 18 as well as catching you all up on how we've been getting on so far this season. Jonny and I have been playing fantasy football against each other for 11 seasons now, and what we lack in expertise, we more than make up for in competitiveness. First though, let's bring in Jonny properly. Jonny, how are you?
I'm good, thank you very much.
Good to hear. Before we get into it, we should probably mention the fact that we're recording this podcast on Sunday evening, and at the moment with a certain virus that's knocking about, we don't know what's going to happen with a couple of the fixtures. So if you listen to this later in the week, Tuesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, quite frankly what you've been doing, but take it with a pinch of salt. First of all, Jonny, do you want to explain why we're called the 115 Fouls FPL podcast?
Yeah, of course. And to be clear, we are a 115 Fouls podcast, because when I explained this to my other half, she asked me why we were called the 115 Fouls. Which was, it's easy to explain in some senses, but harder in others. We are not an equestrian themed podcast. We are a fantasy football podcast.
We're basically like the Mourinho's little horse of podcasts, aren't
we? Yeah, but yeah. So we're 150 Fouls. And look, it's named after the big man Kevin Davis, who in the 10-11 season managed to chalk up 115 fouls in a single Premier League season for Bolton Wanderers. Look, Kev, I'm really sorry. I don't know how many goals you got that year, but this our league is a testament to you. This podcast is a testament to you. Look, it's all out of love, but we are 115 fouls based on Kevin Davis. And look, Kev, we hope one day you'll come and join us for a chat.
Yeah, I echo those sentiments. Hopefully, the main ambition of this podcast is really just at some point interview Kevin Davis, essentially, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And he's well known for his that spell at Bolton where he was prolific in his fouling, but he's also played for a Premier League winning club in his career. He hasn't won the Premier League, but he's played for the mighty Blackburn Rovers. And I think we should all just appreciate the fact that he made it to the top at one point in his career. It's better than that England cap that he got, obviously.
Well, it depends where you look at it. I suppose if I was a big Kev, I'd be proud of the fact that I played for a country that won the World Cup, but over the Premier League, probably a higher testament. But either way, it's a big one, right?
Too big a gap, mate. It's honestly 66 to 2013. It's just too big a gap. I think Blackburn won the league in '95. He was playing for us in the 2000s. That was sort of the prime of his career, really. If we're being honest, the fact that he was overlooked for England at that point is just it's obscene.
Absolutely obscene. Look, big Kev, massive fan. Love your work, but also love your fouls.
We do love Kev's fouls. And that's just a brief glimpse into the sort of statistics that we're going to be offering through the duration of this podcast. If you're after the real insight, this is where it's at. So with that in mind, John, so tell us a bit about you as a fantasy football player.
Right. I am ambitious. I am tenacious. I am tenacious, and I'm a staunch competitor, but I am also mediocre in results. But look, I don't think I've got the best returns over the course of a full year, but I'm not the guy that does 5 weeks, has a bad time of it, and then just forgets about it. I make my transfers every week. I talk about it all the time. I love it. I just haven't returned many good podium finishes, let's say.
Do you know your best ever fantasy football finish?
I don't, but I get a feeling you're going to tell me.
Oh, I am. I absolutely am. So your best ever finish in fantasy football so far is 440,000 overall, which is out of 7.5 million is admirable. It's fine. But you're doing significantly better this season. How are you getting on?
I think I'm sneaking inside the top 30,000 this year. But we have got a lot of season left to go. But I think I'm 29 something or other.
Yeah, you are 29,652 overall. You've been skirting though. You've had a couple of bad game weeks the last couple of game weeks, but you've been skirting around the 10,000 mark for most of the season. So it's been, a huge improvement. It's quite admirable, really. It's a big step up.
I've got Claudio Ranieri in my corner. This is Leicester's year again. I'm coming through.
Well,
we shall see.
As mentioned at the top of the show, we've been doing this for 11 years. Jonny's never won our mini league, and he's hoping this will be the first time.
And if you're curious, there's not many people in that league.
There isn't. There's only been 3 winners in those 11 seasons, and I have taken down 7 of them, which brings me on to my statistics. I'm currently 6,173 overall. My best finish historically has been 15,983. So I'm actually doing better than usual at this season. So it's been a slight change of tactics for me, and we'll talk about that as the podcast goes on. But it's been a good year so far, and I think there's a reason this season has benefited a certain type of manager and the way they play.
Yeah, I mean, it's strange you say that though, because I don't think I'm doing that bad this year. But you and I could not play this game more differently.
Yeah, no, we definitely do. So explain how you play the game, John.
I'm not really a stat guy. The concept of picking a player on XG is not something I do at all. It's mostly based on watching football. I'm a massive football fan. Man United fan for my sins. Growing up in a small town not close to Manchester tends to breed that. I watch a lot of football and I make my picks based on the players performing that I think are going to get me points. That is it basically. Talking about football, watching football, it steers my choices really. I know that others look at a lot of the stats and stuff, but it's never been something that I've invested my time in.
Well, I think that's interesting you say that, because I've historically been a player that plays the game both kind of through sight, because I watch an incredible amount of football as well since I was a very young person. This year I've adopted a much more statistical based approach to it, seeing that I was sort of flailing a little bit compared to some of my better finishes in the past. So I've got 7 top 100k finishes, but they're not getting into the area that I want to be. So I've tried to take a different approach. It's working at the moment, but in terms of why that's the case.
Let's just talk about why you're better than me.
Look, John, I've got to get the brags in there early on so people understand, what this is. The big thing to talk about next is we've obviously starting a podcast in the middle of the season, which is a bit odd. So let's talk about the season so far, and why don't you name your top 3 picks of the season who've garnered you points, or you have just been good value fantasy Premier League players?
I think I'll start with the guy that he's one of the 3 players that I've had from the start, which is James Justin. I think pre-season there was probably 3 players being considered in that 4.5 category, and it was him, Walker Peters, and Vinagre. And out of the 3 of them, he's probably the best pick. Definitely over Vinagre, given he's not there anymore. He's on loan, I think. But yeah, I think he's sort of held down his position in that team. And look, there's some pending issues with Ricardo coming back on that side, but generally he's just been a real good asset into my team. Did something I'd never done this year. Played my wildcard second week. And got Dominic Calvert-Lewin in, which I missed the first week of him, but played every other week since. I think those numbers speak for themselves, so I won't labour on that point too much, even though his form's dwindled off recently. And then probably strangely, I think I'm going to answer this with an obvious player really, but I swapped Aubameyang for Salah in game week 2. Pretty happy with that decision really, but I know it took a few others a little bit longer, but it was definitely a bit more of a testament to some of my earlier points that were coming through.
Interesting. I mean, I've got sort of similar picks really in a sense, because I guess our teams have they've mirrored each other. But I've had Salah since game week 1. I've had DCL since game week 1. Like DCL is one of my top 3 picks so far. Even again that he's not in my team anymore. I got rid of him on wildcard in game week 16 for Bamford. I have had Justin since game week 1 as well. But I think outside of that, Heung-min Son has been sort of I've kept him in my side throughout this whole season, barring 1 week where I transferred him out because Mourinho said he wasn't fit, and he played against Man United and scored massively. But barring that, I've had every single haul from him so far, and he's been a massive impact in terms of my side and getting points. But I was also maybe one of the sort of early hitters on Fernandes from United, who got him in at a time when he just started scoring points, and that, even though everyone has him now, it was important to get him in at that time, and with keeping Son in my team as well, and Salah. So the next thing to talk about is this week coming up. So we've got a blank game week, which for those of you who don't know, is a game week that has less than the prescribed 10 fixtures that usually come with each fantasy football week. So we've got 6 fixtures at the moment. There's a potential for there to be less depending on fixture cancellations. We ended up getting an extra game week because Manchester United Burnley was added in quite late on in the scheduling. I know this already, but yeah, we both played our 3 hits this week, Johnny, which I think has been a part of a long-term plan. But do you want to explain why that was? Did you have it in your head that this is always going to be the case, or did you work towards it, or did it just happen that you didn't have enough players to play, so you had to?
Steve, honestly, the fact that you think I don't have a plan after all these years is justified. But for the first year ever, it was planned. It's probably the 3rd season in a row where there's been a game week where there's 5 or 6 games going on, and I wasn't initially planning for the game week after that, which had loads of double game weeks in, but I was always saving my free hit for the inevitable week that comes where there's just less around, and inevitably I've been building my team towards a situation where it has as many people as it can for the double game week, which means I've got a lot less playing this week, hence the free hit. So probably more planning than ever, actually. But a fair question. Definitely based on previous.
I have to ask John. It's now my job apparently. Right. That's the idea. I've had I mentioned earlier that I played my wildcard in game week 16, the latest that you could possibly play your first wildcard, and with a view to this week as a free hit. And actually, just as a kind of caveat to that, it's backfired a little bit because I was working towards the double game week and having a team that was basically all double game week based for that week. But then there was the Man City versus Aston Villa fixture added in to that game week, and it's meant that I haven't really got enough Villa or City players in my side. So it's a weird thing at the moment going on with long-term planning in FPL is a really dangerous proposition, because we just don't know, with a lot of fixtures being cancelled. If you're interested in getting that information and knowing somebody who's in the know, go to Twitter at Ben Krellin, who is the spreadsheet master who knows everything there is to know about when a game week might be.
Thank you, Steve. That's
another bit of advice there that I'm leaking to Johnny. But yeah, Ben is excellent, and he's always across when things might be rearranged. Let's move on to the fixtures this week, because it's obviously, I say 6 fixtures this game week, and let's start with your team, John, Man United. They're away to Burnley. Who are you targeting?
Well, I've had Bruno in for quite a while now. It took me a little bit longer than it should to get a Man United player in, given they're my team, but I've got Bruno in and I've had him for quite a while now. And he's going to stay. He's the most important person. He just, home or away, never fails to get points, but particularly away, he's the boy, right? So he's number one pick. But my team does have 3 Man United players in. I do feel like we'll win that game. I feel like we're in a bit of form at the moment, that, particularly in the league. We're on really good form. So I've got Bruno Fernandes in, but there are a few players dotted around that I'm looking at that I think might make an appearance. Marcus Rashford is someone that I'm massively considering. He's quite highly priced for it, but he's a midfielder. I think he's on a huge amount of form. He's looking like goals and assists, looking really lively, so I'm thinking about him a lot. Depending on the fitness of the fullbacks, it might be Alex Tellers or Luke Shaw, depending on which one's fit. Wan-Bissaka's always a pretty steady option, but I think it'll be a defender and 2 midfielders from Man United most likely is probably what's going to go. Being a Man United fan, I can't just by putting Martial in it. I don't feel like he offers me enough chances for goals.
It's interesting because last season I had him in for a long period when he was a midfielder, and he seemed to, like, every couple of weeks just score a goal, and it was a nice little points accumulation over those weeks, and he's just not really done it this season so far.
But there's a difference, isn't there, between the interest in a player when they move from that midfield to forward position?
Absolutely. Yeah, he like, obviously you score less points, you're less likely to get bonus points. There's all of those things that come.
And there's only 3 of them. You can only have 3.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think obviously the price points this season, you're talking about Rashford, Son and Rashford are basically the only 2 midfielders that are in the 9 million price range this season, which means that if the Villa and Spurs game is called off and you weren't going to put Rashford in, there's a really simple transfer there for you going for Son to Rashford, 9.8 to 9.6. Like, United are on good form at the moment, but I think there's a couple of caveats I just want to throw in there. First of all, Man United have not kept a clean sheet away from home this season at all. And they've conceded 2 against Brighton, they conceded 2 against Sheffield United. And if you're looking for differential options, especially up front, somebody who I tweeted out 2 days ago is Chris Wood, who basically is a potential option. He's got an expected goals of 6, he's scored 3, which means he's not performing to the level he should be. Burnley traditionally underperform in XG, and that's unexpected points as well. So Chris Wood is totally underperforming amongst, like, the Burnley way of working. This has been going on for seasons, so he's due to start probably firing at some point. And United don't keep clean sheets away from home. So at 6.2, great option. And there's obviously the option of going for Pope in goal, who might offer big save points, and obviously United will get a penalty, so he might save that. So
hey, come on,
that might be the way to go. Let's move on anyway to the next fixture. The next one is Manchester City versus Brighton. So, John, what are you thinking? There's a bit of an idea of, like, whether you should be going for double City defence or double City attack. What are you doing?
Not sure, but the way my team is currently set up is double City attack. I'm going with KDB, definitely, based on the set pieces and things like that. Plus, like, Pep Roulette always makes it a little bit hard, but also a little bit easy because there's only 4 or 5 players that are definitely going to start. So I've got 2 blue in the midfield and one at the back. One's KDB, but I might tweak. But I'm feeling that I feel like it's going to be a City whitewash. I feel like it's going to be a lot of goals, and I want more attackers getting points for those goals.
Yeah, I mean, I'm to be totally frank about it. I'm currently set up with 2 City defenders and a midfielder, which is obviously Kevin De Bruyne. There's serious doubts about Sterling after today. He didn't make the squad for the FA Cup tie against Birmingham, and he's apparently picked up a bit of a knock, so no one's quite sure whether he's fit or not. Aguero apparently is now out with COVID, so he is an absolute no-no. So if you're thinking about him as a differential, don't. Jesus and Walker were back, so there are a couple of players that you might want to think about. But I guess with Cancelo occupying that right-back spot at the moment, Walker's a rotation risk in a way that you might not want to approach.
Edison made the bench today, though. Edison made the bench.
He did. So I guess there's that, and he's another option as maybe a safer bet in that defence if you want to. But I guess if you're going for total security, you probably would pick Diaz. Stones didn't start today, who I know Jonny has in his main
Regular.
team, and is probably going to start because he was benched this week in the FA Cup. So that's an option. He's obviously the cheapest defender that City have as well. Just to kind of give a bit of a caveat to Brighton, because we're talking about this is going to be like a total whitewash. Brighton are underperforming their expected points by a huge amount. Like they're at the same level as Manchester United and Leicester at the moment in terms of what their points should be. They look good when you see them. They can score goals. They've got a good attack. They've got a good defence. It's just not clicking for them at the moment. So like there's a longer term effect here with Brighton where if you write them off as whipping boys and somebody who somebody's going to knock 5 or 6 goals past, I think you're totally mistaken at the moment. Like, but they might be the anti-Burnley. Burnley don't do good statistically, but they get points. Brighton do great statistically, they get no points compared to it. So you have to weigh that. You have to weigh those things up, and I don't think Brighton are a whipping boy in this league. So
maybe not in this league, but in this game they're out of their depth. City are in full throttle at the moment, and without a dedicated striker, they are still looking more of an attacking threat than any other team for me.
Yeah, and I think that they're clearly like they've got the best defence in the league. They've got they're starting to hit full form. You know, they battered Man United in the League Cup semi-final. They did all right against Chelsea as well in the league, and they obviously quite well against Birmingham today. So it's they're starting to hit full form now. Let's move on to the next fixture before Jonny punches me through these microphones. The next one, and this has garnered a lot more interest. I think if you'd looked at this fixture 3 weeks ago, not many people would have been interested in assets from it. But Arsenal versus Crystal Palace. Who are you looking at, John?
It's a strange one, really, because the guy that everyone talks about is Zaha, right? Which he's probably the biggest bone of contention in most fantasy football persons, whether he's a good shot or not. And I like him, right? I do. I'm finding it hard to find a place for him, but I might. Particularly based on the fact that I didn't realise Sterling was an injury out. Thanks for that, Steve.
This is the problem with this podcast. I'm going to end up just giving away all of my prior research knowledge to Jonny, and he's going to catch me up in the long term.
Come on, why have a dog and bark yourself, eh? But I mean, look, it's for me, like when I watch him play, I just think he's like Grealish in the sense that he just draws so many fouls. So every free kick and every penalty, I assume there's quite a high percentage on him being the person that's getting taken down for it. He's just so tricksy. Like he just constantly gets taken down, which makes him an absolute assist merchant. And then second to that is that I know Palace will score a lot of goals, but every single goal they score, he's involved in it somehow, and inevitably it's usually him assisting or scoring it himself. So that just makes him a good option for me to think about. Albeit it's doing it against an Arsenal side in the last couple of weeks, which makes it a bit tougher. So yeah, he's the obvious one to look at, but he's the biggest bone of contention, right? But most managers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a total sort of anti-Zaha FPL manager.
Boo!
I always have been, and I think this is the first season where I've ever really looked at him as an actual option because he's performing to his stats. He's he's just below his expected goals. So he has suddenly become better, but he's playing more centrally and he's becoming a better player. He's mid-price, so if you want to go down that route, I think there's better options at that price. But he's not my he's one of these players who, when you watch Crystal Palace play and you don't own him, you fear watching him because he's so good. Like he's a great
Yeah.
he's a great player and he deserves to play for a top club, but he's not for me a fantasy Premier League asset, and that's the issue. Just as like a bit of a side note, and to make it a bit more light-hearted, he's playing up front with Christian Benteke at the moment, who is sort of like the most statistical anomaly of any, maybe apart from David McGoldrick, of any striker going, that he just does not finish good chances. But he's a good link-up striker now. He's changed his game. He's not the Villa striker who scored 16 goals in a season. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun watching Benteke now because there's no expectation. Whereas it used to be the fact that he used to be the main man. He's definitely not the main man anymore. So don't pick him for your fantasy team, folks.
Don't. But if on the topic of cheap options though, the Crystal Palace strikers are good options, though, aren't they?
Yeah.
Ayew and Benteke are really cheap prices in a week where not many people are playing. So, I mean, whether they're long-term options or not, who knows? But if you're playing your free hit, maybe have a look. If you're not, maybe not.
Absolutely. Let's move to just Arsenal, because obviously their form has changed in the last 3 games in a way that like nobody probably would have expected. I think there's an interesting pick in Emile Smith-Rowe, who is probably the cheapest starting midfielder now in the Premier League, but he's also, this is a very small sample size, so bear with me, but he's also got the 5th highest expected assists of any midfielder in the Premier League this season based on his minutes. He's only played, I think, 224 minutes in the Premier League so far, so it's a small sample size, so that's to be taken with a pinch of salt. But he obviously scored in midweek against Newcastle in the Cup. Not midweek, sorry, at the weekend, because that's where the FA Cup is played. But yeah, there's an interesting. If you want a midfield enabler, Smith Rowe's a great shout. And then just as a
helpful replacement for Martinelli, that Steve, isn't it?
yeah. So I put in Gabriel Martinelli 2 weeks ago to try and have a little differential that could come off the bench if needs be, and especially in the double game week. He's now crocked. He didn't start in the last game week. In fairness, it got me 6 points from Sue Fowl, so it's fine. But yes, bad shout from Steve, but and it's now ruined the fact that I have one transfer this week because I'm playing my free hit. So that's an explanation of why you shouldn't maybe take a punt at a time when you're trying to be secure and thinking maybe about playing your bench boost next week, which we'll talk about in the podcast on Thursday. 2 more quick ones on Arsenal before we move on. Aubameyang is obviously going under the radar as a high-priced midfielder who is now playing centrally and was probably seen as like the best value player in the game right at the start of the season. Are you thinking about him, John?
You know what? I wasn't, and then today I kind of went, oh yeah. I was like, well, he scored in the cup, and I was like, oh yeah, Aubameyang. And it kind of felt like the perfect time to maybe think about him again, really, in a week where it has max amount of value to do so. Like, I'm not dropping Salah to get him in, which is basically the justification, right? So I wasn't, but I am now. Plus, thanks for the heads up on Sterling. That might be the replacement.
You're very welcome. And the other one I was going to mention was obviously Kieran Tierney, who's just been on fire. And if you've got the money, put him in. There's he's an attacking / defensive / assist merchant. I think if you've got any if you're on a free hit this week, he's a great player to put in. So that's in my humble opinion. Let's move on quickly to Wolves versus Everton. I think a lot of people see this as like a dead game. There's not many people targeting assets. Is anybody you're thinking about in this game, John?
Yeah, DCL should be thought about, but ultimately I'm passing because I want to spend points elsewhere. Digne, I think he's back, but don't think I'm going to put him in again. Too expensive. Rodriguez, again, want to, but don't think I'm going for him. But the one thing I'm actually being really, really serious about thinking about doing is doubling up the keeper choices and going Pickford and Olsen, thinking that it's going to be a dead game.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, there's interesting picks here. I guess Everton are coming back to full strength, which is DCL has done well when Everton have been at full strength this season, but he's not done so well when they haven't. So whether those players are fit and ready to go is another matter. On the Wolves front, there's a couple of interesting guys that you might want to look at. Neto is obviously looking on fire at the moment and passes the eye test, but I guess he's not quite produced the returns that maybe a lot of managers would expect from him so far. So he's one to kind of keep an eye on. He's cheap. And the other is a guy who I had earlier this season, Roman Saiz, who just seems to love scoring in every single game that he plays in. Now that Kilman has been banished back to the bench, so
should we just do the sensible thing and say let's not talk about Adama Traore given he hasn't scored a goal in over a year?
Well, I mean that was kind of my thinking really, but he obviously Premier League goal. He did score in the cup, but it was like from 25 yards with his left foot. So I think the idea he's going to do that every week is probably improbable. So yeah, don't pick Adama Traore.
That sounds like when Glenn Johnson started cutting in.
He's basically like Zaha from 5 years ago. It's like no end product, but he's just interesting to watch. One last thing, just as like a note, don't pick Patrick Catrone. He's I know you weren't thinking about him, he wasn't on your radar, but just don't. Been looking at his stats at Fiorentina since he's been on loan there, not very good. And like he looked like a great talent before he moved to Wolves, and it's just not worked for him. So yeah, he is not gonna fill that Jimenez void that you might be looking for in your life. Let's move on to maybe what looks like the most boring fixture in Premier League history. Sheffield United versus Newcastle. What are you making
goal
of this game?
Fest. Obvious goal fest. I mean, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because like, I think it's going to be a little bit more interesting than people give it credit for. Because, and this is like where I tie very much into when I do play fantasy football. Because I think that it's going to be more goals than we think. Strangely enough. Because I think Sheffield are weak, but they can go for it because they're desperate to get that mark. I think Newcastle are looking better at the moment. I'm a big advocate for seeing Andy Carroll get some more game time, and I'll talk about that a bit more later. I think he's a really good shout in a strange little way. It's, the fact he played a lot of minutes in the cup didn't help, but he just looks so handy. So, yeah, I mean, definitely you can't ignore Wilson. Right, takes penalties, 6.5, he's there, and there's also some really cheap defenders knocking about for Newcastle against a team that just can't score. So, not looking at any Sheffield United players at all. For me, they're just a non-consideration team at the moment. But I think there's some bargains for points in the Newcastle team.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at Newcastle defenders, like Yedlin and Clark are obviously been like recent starters. Lewis was at the beginning of the season; he might be back in time for that game, who are all less than 4.5 as enablers. I guess probably bench enablers, you would probably imagine. As you say, Wilson, his goal percentage for Newcastle, like in goal involvement percentage is through the roof. So he's probably the guy to pick if you're going to go for a striker. Maybe not Andy Carroll, but if you want to listen to Jonny, that's your prerogative.
Come on.
But
right, look, last Premier League game out, he got 7 points in about 15 minutes. Imagine what he could do with 90.
Well, exactly. If you want to trust Jonny, you go ahead, have fun, and enjoy Andy Carroll at what, 5.2, John, is he?
5.2. Plus, if you do it and nobody else does, imagine how much bragging rights you have.
This will eventually bring us on to the Simon Davis story, but we haven't got time for it today, so we'll save that for another time.
Tension loop.
I'm gonna have a quick a sort of like argument towards Sheffield United. Sheffield United are underperforming their expected points by 15 this season, so they should be on 17 points on the basis of that. Obviously got 2 so far. I think David McGoldrick has the ability to score a lot of points in one individual week. He's a bad long-term shout, but if you're looking for somebody who is cheap and a bit of a bench filler, he might be worth a punt. I sort of have the feeling that Sheffield United might get the first win in this game. especially because of Newcastle's schedule recently and the fact that they've had such traumas with the old virus. Let's do the final fixture very quickly because it might be called off, so there's kind of no point in lingering on it. But if Aston Villa Spurs goes ahead, Johnny, who would you have in your team?
Kane, Son, definitely. Maybe Lloris. That is about it. Not looking at any Villa. Should look at Grealish. Probably should because he is class, but against Spurs, probably not going to. So if it goes ahead, Kane and Son definitely. But maybe Lloris.
Yeah, I mean, I've kept Kane and Son in throughout. I'm sort of even thinking in a double game week, I'm going to keep them both in because I think they might score points in that. So they're there for me. And I also have, at the moment, in one of my drafts where this game goes ahead, both Grealish and Watkins, because I sort of see this might be a higher scoring game than many might appreciate. And Villa are just very good this season. Like, they've just turned around.
Oh, yeah.
From last season where they looked like relegation fodder, they are just better. Okay, so that brings us perfectly on to predicting the scores for this week. So let's start with Burnley Manchester United. Johnny, who do you think is going to win and by what score?
3-0 Man U, I reckon.
Okay, I'm kind of in the bracket that I think United will probably win this game, but I'm going to go for 2-1. I think it's going to be a bit tighter. Second, Manchester City versus Brighton.
I think this is a drubbing 4-0. Could be more.
I'm going to go for 3-1. I think Brighton are going to get a sneaky goal on the counter-attack, or maybe something from a set piece. Lewis Dunk, maybe, which goes against my putting two City defenders in to make myself feel better. Arsenal versus Crystal Palace.
2-1 Arsenal. But
I'm going to go for 2-0 Arsenal. Yeah, 2-0. I'm debating between 1 and 2-0, but 2-0 Arsenal. That's my final decision. Wolves Everton.
1-0 Everton.
I think this is going to be a secret classic, and I'm going to go for 2-2 Wolves Everton.
Patrick Cutrone brace.
Patrick Cutrone is going to come off the bench and do some special things. Sheffield United versus Newcastle.
2-0 Newcastle.
I'm going to go the opposite. I'm going to go 2-1 Sheffield United to pick up their first win of the season. And on the off chance that Aston Villa Spurs goes ahead, what do you think is going to happen?
3-1 Spurs.
I'm going to go for a score draw, 1-1, because I think Aston Villa are very good and Spurs will struggle to break down a relatively good Aston Villa defence and will probably concede. Feel free to troll us about this when the results are all wrong. If you want to follow us on social media, which is a lovely link into this, we are at 115 Fouls FPL on Twitter. We are at 115 Fouls FPL podcast on Instagram. So yeah, if you want to go out and find us and see some bits and pieces that we have been tweeting and gramming, please do follow us. So
you can also find us at 115 Foals. Just as an FYI.
Thanks, John. That's yeah. If that's how you want to pronounce it, we're okay with that. So I'm about to do the goodbyes, but I think I should probably end on a baby horse joke, really, on that basis, shouldn't I?
Yeah, as long as it ties in Kevin Davis, I'm cool with it.
It doesn't, but okay. Okay, here's my only baby horse joke that I know. What do you call a baby horse in a tree?
I don't know, Steve.
Foliage.
Good.
Anyway, that's all we've got time for. Thank you for listening to the first ever edition of the 115 Fouls FPL podcast. We will be back later this week with some more wonderful content, as you can probably imagine from listening to this. We will try our best to help you through the double game week 19 that is coming up. So yeah, thank you for listening. I've been Steve.
I've been Johnny.
He got there in the end. And we will see you next week. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.